You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
We thank our every week listeners that never missed a single weekly duck migration forecast last season. We also picked up a ton of new listeners throughout this summer, so we thank y'all for spreading the word and continuing to spread the word about the Foul Weather Podcast. We remind you that we are the only duck migration forecast available. All other duck migration reports are just that, reports. We forecast where ducks are going to be during the coming week. We do not report where ducks were last week, and we predict where ducks will be migrating in the coming week using the best available science. Our dedicated listeners know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. Think about that. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks even know where they are at. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the Foul Weather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. I'm your host, Dr. Mike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. We are certainly thinking about duck shooting and early goose hunts as the days get shorter, the crops are ripening, and that best season, the fall season, is coming. We're now locked into many of our trips for the season. The trail cameras and stands are in the deer woods. A last trimming for us is coming up in the next week, and then we won't be back to those deer grounds until the beginning of October in Jack's Reef country. I also do want to apologize today if I sound a bit different this week. I got the summer COVID that so many have been getting this year, so please bear with me, but I got a little bit of turmeric ginger tea with a shot of Jim Beam and some honey in it, so hopefully that's going to get us through this episode. Appreciate y'all being with us. Today, though, as we enter the end of summer at the farm in Jack's Reef and we start to think about the hunts to come, we pause to reflect on and talk and tell stories about hurricanes, floods, and blue-winged teal. The hurricane season for the U.S. and Canada is expected to be what I will call hyperactive this year. And yes, Canada is also included here. They also see tropical storms of influence from Ontario through the maritime provinces, and many Canadians just got smashed with 4+ inch rain from Debbie. Even I heard upwards of 10 inches and major flooding in the city of Montreal and all through the St. Lawrence River Valley. At the time of this recording of this episode, Ernesto is on pace to be at near hurricane strength as it paces towards the Maritimes of Canada, specifically Newfoundland. It's a little bit up in the air now, but let's just say the Canadian provinces are not outside the scope of hurricanes, or at least the tropical systems that move up the coast thereafter. We've already seen two major systems, Beryl and Debbie, which dropped substantial rains and affected large areas of duck habitat. Hurricane season is a major influence on available habitat for migrating ducks in the eastern U.S. because it runs from June to November, and those systems typically move through the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways and sometimes the southern central flyway, mostly Texas.
Hold on, folks. Don't turn that channel. We've got some really exciting news for you. The Foul Weather Podcast has teamed up with Wildlife Strategies. That's right. I'm now working directly with Ryan Delaney of Wildlife Strategies to build value into your land. Wildlife Strategies is already known for quality wildlife habitat management, be it deer, turkeys, ducks, or whatever you pursue. Ryan knows his stuff. Look, I don't add my name to just any business, but I believe in what Wildlife Strategies is doing for landowners throughout the Southeast U.S. and beyond. If you want science-based solutions to create great wildlife habitat, Wildlife Strategies is your best bet. If you're interested in ducks, when we say, may your skies be filled, well, Wildlife Strategies does just that. They fill your skies with ducks. Contact Ryan Delaney today at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. You won't be disappointed you did. Ryan covers the southern tier of states, and I'm available to build habitat management plans across the northern tier. Contact us today for a quote. The Wildlife Strategies team sees your property through from the initial assessment and development of a 3-year time frame management plan through annual check-ins and course corrections as needed. Contact Ryan today at ryan@farmlg.com or Dr. Mike at foulweather.co. You won't be disappointed you did. Fill your skies with ducks and your forests and fields with deer and turkey with Wildlife Strategies.
I don't know, maybe, just maybe, even the long-term success of ducks in North America depends on hurricane rains that fill wetlands in a timely manner during migration in eastern North America. Even as far north as where we're at in Jack's Reef, we get these tropical systems that fill wetlands just in time for migration in early October when they were otherwise dry through August and September. Of course, in our coastal regions, there's massive damage to coastal areas important to ducks. But on the inland areas, the water that comes with hurricanes and tropical systems really does, to a large degree, help our waterfowl that are migrating south. The peak of hurricane season is 20 August to mid-October, but officially runs from June through November. If you follow weather like we do, then you know that the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University provides expertise through their Tropical Meteorological Project, headed by Dr. Phil Klausbach. But before Dr. K, there was Dr. Bill Gray, expert in tropical meteorology and a pioneer in the field of seasonal hurricane forecasting. That on August 20th of each year, Dr. Bill Gray would walk through the halls and offices of the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State, loudly ringing a bell to officially ring in the busiest 6 weeks of hurricane season. Yeah, I guess it's odd for Colorado State to be the epicenter of hurricane research, maybe as unlikely as Jack's Reef, or my job with waterfowl and wetlands at ESF being an epicenter of all things duck hunting and duck conservation. But it is what it is. And you're likely going to hear Colorado State's name this year during hurricane season, just how it is as unlikely as myself, a kid from a trout stream in the hills of western New York, became a duck nerd. The state of Mississippi in the Mississippi River certainly played a major role in my life. It was in 2008 that my wife Sarah and I showed up in Mississippi and then worked at Mississippi State for 3 years. In that time, Sarah got her master's degree working in moist soil wetlands, and I taught classes and assisted in research with Dr. Rick Kaminsky. Our stories thereafter are long to where we are now, but Sarah now works as a managing director for conservation programs with Ducks Unlimited, and I'm at the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry running a thriving and growing wetlands and waterfowl program. Where I teach is affectionately known as ESF, short for Environmental Science and Forestry, because it's the longest name in college history, I believe. But I digress. In 2008, we landed in Mississippi for a 3-year term. The people were wonderful, the bottomland hardwood forest welcoming, and the ducks cooperative. It was an amazing 3 years. We both advanced professionally, and we co-authored a moist soil wetland book along with many friends, including Heath Hagee and James Callicutt, who have both been guests on the Foul Weather podcast. Josh Cheshire from what we call Up and Over in Washington State also was an author. For 3 years, a guy from New York, me, a young lady from North Bay, Ontario, yeah, that's in Canada, my wife, a corn-fed kid from Oklahoma, Heath, a duck-calling fool from Mississippi, James, and Up and Over from Washington, Cheshire, became great friends and shared a ton of ideas on and studied waterfowl and wetlands science, management, and conservation. From that friendship came our book, A Guide to the Moist Soil Plants of the Mississippi Alluvial Valley, that made its debut in 2012. But in 2008, over 3 years since Hurricane Katrina, when Sarah and I arrived in Mississippi from our 3 years in Maine, in the minds of our friends in Mississippi, it was like Hurricane Katrina had just happened. We quickly realized even bringing it up was like cursing. The scars on the land from flooding remained, and the scars on New Orleans were even more noticeable. The trees grew out of sidewalks and streets in abandoned portions of the city. Katrina maxed out as a Category 5 hurricane that made landfall as a Category 3 over South Louisiana and Mississippi. Along with Hurricane Irma, Katrina, the storms shredded the already sick coastal wetlands of Louisiana. The wetland had been losing ground for years. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but the wetlands of the Louisiana Delta have been degrading for years, and weaker wetlands equal stronger storm surges. But it wasn't just the coast that got hit. Katrina's eye went through Louisiana and Mississippi as it faded inland towards Tennessee. At its most intense, it dropped 17 inches of rain, but continued into Mississippi at 6 to 8 inches of rain. The ghost of Katrina haunts so many even today, and from that tragedy, we've worked to build resiliency into our coasts. Wetlands help protect our cities from storm surge, and many, many substantial projects are the product of the horror that Katrina brought to us. Floods are a constant reminder that we are just observers in a larger series of events, some of which we have control and others we do not. We are lucky nowadays that we have very well-established observing systems and predictive models to forecast severe weather events. The Foul Weather Podcast itself is just an extension of those systems, such as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, that provides quality weather data to us daily to use to make our migration predictions. But no flood will compare to the Great Flood of 1927. The Delta region of Mississippi is not a river delta like you think of river deltas, but it starts around Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and ends just south of New Orleans, Louisiana, where the river dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. I'm embarrassed to admit that I just learned that it is called the Delta because an ocean embayment once ran all the way up near Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and the area between Hill Country in Mississippi and Arkansas and Louisiana was a large embayment of the ocean. It was saltwater. Then let's just fast forward a bunch in time, and glaciers happened and then melted, and the continent dumped silt into the void. It built the delta. I'm way outside my expertise sideboards when it comes to this topic, but I'm also well-versed in researching and writing about topics, even when it comes to geomorphology of the Mississippi River. About 72 million years ago, an ocean bay ran all the way up to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and then glacial melts and other events fed mass amounts of silt into the void and made the Mississippi Delta we know today that has rich soil for ducks and farming. But in 1927, the Mississippi flooded for months, covering all 60 miles wide of the Delta from hill to hill. Even in the heat of summer, the floodwater would not abate, it would not recede, and people lived and died on the levees. The politics behind the Great Flood of 1927 are many, but scholars to this day debate the series of events that led to the Army Corps of Engineers, the federal government eventually taking control of state rights over rivers. Undoubtedly, it has saved countless lives from floods, but in the end, we've put in 3,700 miles of levees in the Mississippi Basin and many reservoirs and locks and dams to control the river. That river control, quote-unquote control, has led to a severe disconnect between the river's nutrient-filled floods and the surrounding hardwood forests and wetlands. Nowadays, the Corps of Engineers regulates what can be done with wetlands and navigable waters and very often does not permit changes even if they promote wetland wildlife. But understandably, the Corps of Engineers is about navigation and commerce and not about ducks. So we're really talking apples and oranges. Our friends with state agencies, Ducks Unlimited, and private landowners looking to do the best for ducks regularly run up against the Corps. The same Corps that gained control of the Mississippi and other drainages, reduced wildlife habitat massively, and now won't let it be restored. Whew. Anyhow, that's kind of a loaded comment, so it's a story for another day. The stories of old river keepers and major flood control structures on the Mississippi are many. They've been on flood control structures when they've nearly failed, the walls of concrete structures moving like a wave back and forth as floodwater pulsed against them and ran below where those structures had partially failed. One of those old river keepers, my one takeaway from him, was his comment that it wasn't if the Mississippi River was going to change its path, but when. The Mississippi River channel moves about each millennia, or about once every 1,000 years. How does this happen? The silt from the river builds up enough at the mouth at the delta that another outlet becomes the shortest and fastest option to the ocean. The Mississippi has been in nearly all locations of the Louisiana coast, even nearly to Texas. The most recent shift was when the St. Bernard's outlet that created Lake Pontchartrain moved into the current outlet called Plaquemines. That happened about 1,000 years ago. Now do that math. If the main channel of the Mississippi River moved about every 1,000 years, and Plaquemines was created about 1,000 years ago, you got it. The river does not want to be in its main channel anymore. But since European settlement, massive infrastructure that depends on the river staying in its channel developed. So we can't afford nature to run its course. The Mississippi River right now wants to go down the Atchafalaya River, but we block it for navigation and commerce. The outlet into the Atchafalaya is called Old River, and in 1963 the Corps of Engineers dammed Old River, but they couldn't walk away. It was like sticking your finger in a single hole of a leaky roof. It was bound to spring a leak elsewhere. The Atchafalaya culture, the Cajun culture, also depends on reasonable flow of water. So the Corps, about 10 minutes north of Old River, built 2 outlet structures that release water into the Atchafalaya to keep the flow, but also reduce downstream flooding in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But let's be clear, the Corps did not mean to work with or accommodate nature. They meant to control it. While the water levels vary seasonally in the Mississippi and Atchafalaya, the difference at times, even under typical flow, can be 20 feet. Or the Mississippi is 20 feet higher than the water on the other side of the Old River water control structure. Time is up for the current channel of the 3rd largest river in the world. In 1950, when the Corps started to look to control the Atchafalaya outlet, it was taking 30% of the daily flow of the Mississippi and was ready to consume, to take the Mississippi. But the Corps decided that 30% was reasonable to keep the Atchafalaya culture running, as well as commerce and navigation on the main channel of the Mississippi. So it was decided to maintain that flow in perpetuity. In perpetuity, to control nature. But let us remember that in high spring water years like 1927, 1937, 1973, more than 2 million cubic feet of water went by Old River Outlet every second. 2 million cubic feet of water every second. Controlling the 3rd largest river in the world, it's no small task. From John McPhee's book, Control of Nature, just why the Army, as in Army Corps of Engineers, should be involved at all with levee systems, navigation locks, rock jetties, concrete structures, and the harsh realities of deltic geomorphology is a question that attracts no obvious answer. The Corps is here because it is here. Its presence is an expression not of contemporary military strategy, but of pure evolutionary tradition. Its depth of origin about 1.75 centuries. If the Mississippi did dig its way into the Atchafalaya, we would certainly see disastrous results for some. The Delta would reform to the west. Cultures would develop around that new system. Wildlife would thrive, and we'd see a new day of the Mississippi, or maybe the Atchafalaya. For many reasons, and I'm not arguing good or bad, we constrain the mighty Mississippi inside those levees. But as the old river keeper says, it's not about if the Mississippi moves, but when. And it will eventually do what it wants. If you're the reading type, I do suggest John Barry's The Great Flood of 1927 and How It Changed America, in John McPhee's Control of Nature that dedicates an entire chapter to the Atchafalaya. Okay, that was fun, and I hope you learned something as well. My own journey with the Mississippi is not short. It is my lifeblood, right? I grew up on the banks of the Allegheny River in western New York, the end of Appalachia. I grew up on a trout stream that enters the Allegheny River and then moved into town onto the Allegheny River. But before I was a teenager and moved into town, I walked that trout stream off the Allegheny till it ended. And in some sense, I really felt like I walked to the end of the Mississippi River. The Allegheny River starts in Pennsylvania, runs into New York, and then drops back down into PA. And then it meets up with the Monongahela in Pittsburgh, where it becomes the Ohio, and then on to the Mississippi. So many rivers run into the Mississippi. To the west, it even goes into Canada as the Milk River, above the Missouri as it draws waters from Saskatchewan and Alberta. So, right, if you live on the East Coast, that may define you. If you live in the West over the Continental Divide, that may define you. But most of us are defined in some shape, manner, or form by the Mississippi River. My life has largely been defined by the Mississippi. I grew up on a trout stream as a kid, became a river kid playing in the Allegheny, and then spent much of my life in the Mississippi Basin, working, research, school, finding life, right? Rivers define so many duck people across duck country. So many of us live or have lived in river towns. Okay, enough about rivers and floods. On to a story about blue-winged teal. And as duck season approaches, please provide me some creative license as the Foul Weather Podcast attempts to capture the feeling of hunting blue-winged teal in hot mud. Like a screaming jet, those blue wings just ate my world like nothing I'd ever seen. Before I could move a barrel, they shot through the decoys, but then they banked. They turned and did a 360 first going skyward, but then coming back down and back our way, like an airplane shot into the sky and doing a U-turn. The safety clicked. "Get ready," said the brain, and those same words came out of my mouth by sheer reaction. On the return through, as they took a pause in flight over the decoys, we lit them up and dropped 4 out of 8. Plop times 4 they went, and their brothers, sisters, mommas, and pappas went ripping on to the next adventure. Maybe they see the next gun on the area, or maybe they'd next see the Yucatan on their way winging south. All right, you see, blue-winged teal are our neotropical migrant duck of North America and have a special place in our hearts. So what is a neotropical migrant? It is a bird that spends its winters in the stable environments of Central and South America in the tropics, but comes up our way to exploit seasonally abundant flowering plants and insects during the breeding season. Most of the neotropical migrants are songbirds like orioles, warblers, and tanagers, but we've got one special duck to present today. Enter the blue-winged teal, the neotropical migrant of the duck world. This is a story about those little blue-winged jets in Missouri. Like many, I've never been shy when it comes to finding new critters to hunt or places to hunt. So when I moved to Cape Girardeau, Missouri in August 1999, after spending the summer collecting data at Tishomingo National Wildlife Refuge in Oklahoma for my master's degree research, all I wanted to do was find a way to shoot doves and teal, something I never had the opportunity to do before in a place like the Boot Heel of Missouri. But duck nerds like me don't always connect right away, and the balance of schoolwork with new outdoor adventures made it tough to meet new friends right away. So on opener of teal season in Missouri, I had picked out a spot at 10 Mile Pond Waterfowl Conservation Area that had been disked and flooded, had some teal, and I was primed to go. Just me and the dog. It was like opening day of deer season all over again. I just couldn't sleep. The insects were still singing in the night, and for a kid from the north, it really didn't feel like duck season yet. Sleep came late and the alarm early. In the morning, I pulled into no other trucks in the parking lot and no lights in the marsh in front of me. Given how popular duck hunting is in Missouri, I was sure it was going to be a loss, that dark drive to 10 Mile Pond, but it wasn't. I piled out of the truck with my burly and stinky Chesapeake Bay Retriever. That dog is a story for another day too, but let's just say she wasn't award-winning. Dad had found her for me used, but she did more work than that day. From Missouri to Ontario and on to Maine, where she's buried in the marsh next to Plymouth Pond.
Look, folks, the Farmland Group across the Mid-South is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisals. If you own land or you want land, the Farmland Group is where it's at. With over $500 million in farm sales and growing, Gwynn and Shelby Smith have you covered. Look, if you're thinking about buying or selling, contact the Farmland Group to access their full suite of services. If you already own property and want to build equity and value, the Farmland Group gets it done. If you're looking to purchase a new property, well, they get that done too, and they have access to some of the best lending available. Looking to sell? Get it appraised with the Farmland Group affiliated appraiser. But let's be clear for our listenership too. They also offer farm and hunt property management to create places that attract more ducks and more bucks. Who doesn't want that? More ducks and more bucks. Let the Farmland Group build value into your property. Find them today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. You're not going to be disappointed. Contact Shelby Smith today at farmlg.com and let him know that the Foul Weather Podcast sent you their way.
So me and this stinky burly Chessie, her name was Old Ann, took to the Moiso marshes of Missouri for the first time, got our spot, and as the sun rose and no truck showed up, I pulled out the regulations from my pocket again, double-checked them, and then wondered if had I missed something. No, I'm legal. 5 minutes later, still nobody. So now I'm really wondering if I'm legal, standing in this marsh by myself with this stinky old Chessie Ann. I hauled myself back to the signage at the parking lot to make sure. Yeah, it's teal season all right, and I'm legal. So huffing and puffing back to the blind on the edge of the tilled mud, and I barely got there before legal shooting light. Wings rip through the air. But they're shorebirds. A pile of shorebirds land right in the decoys on the wet mud and shallow water. Bluewing teal and shorebirds go hand in hand. Most bluewings migrate before many plants drop seeds and at a time that invertebrates are abundant. They are basically the shorebird of the duck world when in the U.S. They will eat seeds when available, but most plants are still green when they start to move south. When the bluewings start to move south, most plants aren't at shatter stage and are still green. Shorebirds with bobbing heads with beaks in the mud looking for bugs in front of me. A teal, or maybe it was two, ripped past me. No chance for a shot. Too low, too dark. The next 10 minutes feel like days. The light becomes real light to see, just enough. A group of 6 teal come in and land before I can even see them lit against the sky. The stink dog next to me jumps a bit, and then they shoot out of the spread. Now more near sunrise, I'm itchy to shoot and launch 2 errant shots at a passing group of 3. The marsh lights up with the call of soars, a huntable rail. The next group comes down the drainage ditch and pitches right towards that fresh-tilled mud and little bits of water, that shallow shorebird and teal habitat, and 2 cracks of the 870 and 2 bluewings down. The dog slugs through the mud and brings the first, then the second to hand. Whew, mission accomplished, right? But no time to admire a whack of ducks. Yes, a whack of ducks is officially 15 ducks plus or minus 2 or 3 in the Foul Weather podcast books. So don't forget, a whack of ducks. A whack of ducks cuts the sky to my right, hit the ditch, and pitch back our way. The stink dog sees him too. Ann, stay. I lift the gun, shoot, nope. They skyrocket, going away. Thwack, second shot, nothing. I pick a single on the right and tap off 1 more. Crunch. That bird from, like, the stratosphere plummets into the mud. The fat, stinky Chessie, Ann, of course, breaks and slogs around the bird. No dice. So I go out to help find the duck, me and Fat Ann. She's fat, stinky, and old. The stinky Chessie, the hand-me-down dog, stuck in the mud, and what happens, but a bluewing is coming like on a line right for the decoys, low and screaming and cupped. We're both so covered in mud by this time that the damn bluewing probably can't pick us out from a clump of dirt. With both my legs stuck in the mire, it comes at me left to right. With no good footing to turn, I rip 3 shots with no luck. Gone. Not a feather. But wait, that third duck that plummeted as I make that final swing, I make a little stuck fall to my right and basically land on that blue wing, stuck head first into the mud that we were looking for. So here I am with 3 blue wings at 10 Mile Pond in Missouri on my first real blue wing hunt of my life. A stinky fat Chessie also buried in the mud, stuck up to my knees in hip waders. And you know what? Loving life. But wait. Just wait. That duck I just missed flies out over the corn and soybean desert around 10 Mile Pond and is coming back for a second round. And it's coming fast. I dig through my coat pockets. The shell belt is back at the blind. Nothing. But I always keep a single shell in my right hand jean pocket for luck. Not even sure how long it'd been kept there, really. I grab that shell, drop it into the action of the 870, close the action, raise the gun, and shoot the blue wing at about 40 yards, just going over top of me. He wasn't stopping. He was in full speed. Just another pass. Splat. Skips in the mud, maybe 30 yards behind me. The stink dog goes, does her work, and brings me a banded blue wing teal. a banded blue-winged teal, mud-covered and before cell phones. I remember this more vivid than any phone camera can record. After picking up 2 more teal on later flights, standing in Missouri with a limit of blue wings on my own, other than with that fat, stinky chessie, with sore rails screaming at me in the hot mud of the Mississippi Delta, I was more alive than I'd ever been. All right, so that blue wing is one of my odd bands I've recovered. I've got a lot of stories about band recoveries to come in future episodes, but that blue wing was banded only 2 days before in central North Dakota. A real testament to the fact that when blue wings want to go, they go fast and head to more stable environments. Neotropical migrants are typically obligate migrants defined by spending breeding season in places they can't stay the winter and then wintering in places that are relatively stable environments. So as opposed to the mallard that can greatly modify its wintering area and migration based on weather, the blue-winged teal is most influenced by day length and migrates primarily on photoperiod, whereas all other dabbling ducks we have studied are influenced primarily by weather. Of course, photoperiod, or how long a day is, plays a role for all birds, but when it comes down to dabbling ducks other than blue-winged teal, weather has a greater impact on timing of their migration. Once they are done with summer breeding, blue-winged teal just migrate based on photoperiod to their stable Central and South American wintering grounds. Some go to the Caribbean as well. They have no need to hang out and see if it's going to be comfortable in Missouri in January. The tropics are just fine for them all winter. Thanks for joining us this week for stories and thoughts about floods and fast blue-winged teal. We again want to thank our dedicated weekly listeners. We appreciate you very, very much. Please like, share, and rank the Foul Weather Podcast. And remember, as soon as the 2024 Waterfowl Status Report, or the BPOP numbers as they are also called, are released, we will drop a special bonus episode detailing all of those results. To get that episode as soon as it drops, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. In 2 weeks, we also start our weekly episode format until the end of January. We are the forecast to your next great hunt. And as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.